The dictionary defines lost as no longer possessed or retained, no longer to be found. You see, number 3, having gone astray or missed the way, bewildered as to place, direction. That's the one I want to talk about today. So we'll just line out the first 2. And for today, when we use the word lost, I'm talking about people who just don't know where to go. They've gone astray. They don't know which way is right. They've missed the way. We find some hope in Luke, the 19th chapter, verse 10. For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost, and there is my comfort. If I lose my way, his purpose in coming was to seek people like me out. If you lose your focus, you don't know where you're going, you're not sure which way you should go, our comfort and our consolation is you're the reason he came. He came to seek, to save that which was lost. I find it a little more of a necessary theme these days, because I'm telling you, to me, at my age and having worked in ministry as long as I have, I just feel like everybody ought to be smarter, brighter, more mature scripturally, keener on theology than at any time in any generation before us. And yet, Facebook is scaring me to death. I am terrified at the abundance of ignorance scripturally and philosophically expressed by your friends on Facebook. I honestly would despair if I read it very much. And I've told you before, please don't think I'm going to read anything on Facebook unless you address me, because I'll get on Facebook once a night just to see if my kids are still somewhere. That's not true. But I will get on there and I will scroll up one page, and if nothing grabs my attention and nobody's spoken to me, I'm off of Facebook. I do not backtrack and see what people wrote 10 hours ago. If it's got my tag on it, I'll open it, and then if it's interesting, I'll read it. If it's not, I won't read it, even if you tag me. And that's, I don't mean to be rude, it's just that I don't have a lot of time during the day anyway, and spending time on Facebook is depressing. I honestly don't know if anybody knows the Bible at all. I don't know if anybody has a genuine grasp of logic and reasoning. I know some of you came today hoping and praying that I would talk about the blood moon tonight and tell you the best place you could go park your car to watch it. But I didn't. I don't have a message on the blood moon. And so let me know what it looks like. Take a few pictures, put them on Facebook. Maybe I'll see them. And if the Lord comes tonight, maybe I'll see you in heaven. Maybe. Maybe you'll still be here watching the blood moon. I posted a little blog this past week, and I wasn't trying to be sarcastic or cynical or critical. I just posted it for what it's worth. I was cleaning out some things in my home office and throwing away some old stuff, and I came across some old books, old booklets, and I picked one of them up and started reading through it. The title of the book was, I think the title was What of the Night. It might have been Whence Cometh the Night, but I think it was What of the Night. And so I started reading it, a Canadian theologian. I started reading through it, honestly not knowing for sure what it was or where it came from. It turned out to be, have my wife's grandfather's name on it. So it's a piece of information we picked up long ago when her grandfather passed away. I started reading this book, and I'm telling you, it was a good read, a short read, paperback, and it was a good read, and it was all about the imminence of the coming of Christ. His coming is imminent. And the writer had done his homework. He had signs of the heavens pegged. He had the eclipse of the sun and the moon pegged into about 4 years apart. He had a blood moon coming. And so I'm reading it thinking, well, this is cool. This is current fodder. I knew it was an old book, but this is current. And then I got to a paragraph that said, that's why I'm going to show you in this book why the 2 years in particular have great significance to the coming of the Lord, 1931 and 1935. The book was written in 1931 by a Canadian theologian. That would be 17 years before Israel actually resettled in the land of Israel and became a republic. They were already moving back there. He saw World War I and World War II coming. He saw the world in complete chaos. He described the nations and their absolute atrocities to a T. He described the signs in the heavens. He had theological reasons why those years were significant and important to the return of Christ. And then he said very clearly, that's why I don't think we have very long until Christ comes back. His opinion was his return was imminent, but it may certainly be sometime around 1935, if not 1931. So I posted a few little excerpts from that, and I put it in a blog a week or so ago, not to be cynical about people who are worried about such things now. Well, okay, maybe a little cynical. Because if you remember, it was Jesus himself who gave us a few signs, because men said, Lord, what will be the sign of thy coming? And he said, well, in those days, and he named some things that could be happening in those days. But remember, he also said, it's an evil and adulterous generation that seeks a sign. Why do you need a sign that the Lord's return might be imminent? Why? Why do you need a sign? Would you change the way you live if you thought the Lord was coming next week? If you thought that America was going to be trudged off into war, nuclear war, or our enemies were going to attack us next week, would you change anything? And shouldn't you be changing that anyway? If the Lord's not coming for 100 more years, shouldn't you still be changing the things that are not compatible with Him and His glory, and trying to repent of sins and work things out right? I mean, this is why I feel like sometimes a lot of us are on a path that leads to nowhere. We're lost. We don't know our way. We don't know where we're going, and I guess the frightening aspect of that to me is, I blame it on us ministers in the pulpit. We preached our churches, but not Christ. We preached our doctrines, but not Christ. We preached contemporary and current trends, but not Christ. We preached things that would sell a book, but not Christ. We preached things that would sell a tape, but not Christ. We preached things that would make you feel good when you should have felt bad. And maybe it's we preachers who have led us all down a bad path. Christ even warned that the blind would follow the blind, and they both fall in the ditch together. If you're following somebody who doesn't know his way, you're in trouble. And hence the conversation I had with somebody recently. We were remembering me getting lost, and he was sharing a story about him getting lost and me making fun of him until he found out that I had gotten lost. And so I'll just share a couple of things with you that will pertain to where I want to go after a while. Many years ago, I was preaching in Colorado Springs. And I had preached in Albuquerque for a pastor, and then I went to Colorado Springs and preached a week for a church in Colorado Springs. And the pastor in Albuquerque had been trying to expand his church building and having trouble getting a city permit from the Albuquerque permitting division. So while I was preaching for him and he expressed his frustration at the city permitting division, he showed me his drawings, and I said, half the reason you're not getting a permit is your drawings are not complete, they're not right. He said, how do you know? And I said, well, that's what I do. And he was surprised because I was back from Vietnam, a youngster, and he was surprised that I drew plans and knew how. And so he said, what are you talking about? So I showed him what was wrong with the plan and why he wasn't getting a permit. And he said, could you do that? And I said, well, I don't have any tools. He said, well, why don't you make a shopping list? I'll buy what you need. And when you get through in Colorado, come back to Albuquerque and draw these plans for me. And I said, okay. So I gave him a shopping list. So he went out shopping for drafting boards and T-squares and triangles and, all those things I was going to need to draw his building and draw his parking lot and lay it all out right and go down to City Hall and to the permitting division and get permits for him. And so when I leave Colorado Springs, I've been in contact with him. The family was putting on a feed for me, and I was going to come back and spend a couple of days with them drawing plans, and I wanted to get there by dinner time. And these were the days before cell phones, so kids won't understand this. And so I pulled off on the side of the interstate somewhere up around Santa Fe, and I pulled that map off. I thought there's got to be a shortcut, because if you don't know yet, if you've never traveled that road, it seems like when you come down out of Santa Fe, you make a big unnecessary loop back up north when you're trying to get back down here to the interstate. And I thought, right down there where this road bottoms out and goes back, there's got to be a shortcut between that low point and the interstate. The interstate's just right there. Look, it's right there, as opposed to right here. So there's got to be a shortcut. I pulled over on the side of the road, and I studied that map, and I saw that little blue line. There was a blue line that went from the bottom of that road right on down, wound around a little bit, and got down. And it hit the interstate, and I thought there's no reason in the world. I don't care if it's a bad road. A slow, bad road will be better than driving way back up north over the loop and back. And so I got down there, and finally there's, 1094. That's not, I'm just making a number up. There's a little sign, a little small town with abandoned stores, and there's that sign, and I turned left. And I hit the road. I'm going to make up some lost time and get there in time for dinner. No cell phone to call and apologize if I'm late. So I'm going to hurry and take a shortcut. I hadn't gone a half mile off that paved road until my pavement ran out and I was on rock and gravel. That should have been enough indication right there, in New Mexico especially. That should have been a sign to stop and turn around and go back to the asphalt, but not me. I looked at the map one more time. Are you sure? And sure enough, there's that little tiny blue line. And so I just stayed on man, I'm telling you, it was scenic. It went through a little abandoned town of some kind, and it was only 2 lanes right. And one time there was a cliff on the right side and a cliff on the drop off over there, and I kept going. And 45 minutes later, I saw a stop sign way down there and an asphalt road, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness, but it didn't look like an interstate. And sure enough, I get up to the stop sign. It's a nice asphalt road. It's not an interstate. And so I get my map out trying to figure out where in the world am I. And then I finally see a street sign with a highway number on it, and I look, and I'm like, well, that's the highway I was on 45 minutes ago. So I study it. I kid you not. I finally saw back up this way the little abandoned town that I could remember when I first turned off. I had spent 45 minutes in a box canyon winding my way around and coming right back out where I had started. No cell phone to call and apologize, so I just hit the road flying. When I finally got to the interstate, I hit the road flying into Albuquerque. I go over the Sandia Mountain. I'm doing about 95 to 100. There's a policeman backed up in the little driveway at the crest of the mountain. So, of course, as I go flying over, airborne, I'm sure, he hits his light quickly, and he comes chasing me down the mountainside and pulls me over. And I know I've been caught doing about 100. And I pull over, and he comes walking up beside the car and said, "You in a hurry?" And I said, "Well, a little bit." "Any kind of emergency?" "No, just dinner, 45 minutes late, thanks to one of your gravel roads and bad maps." I didn't say that. Campbell, I was a gentleman. I said, "No, sir, I'm just late for dinner appointment, and I know I'm speeding, so just," he said, "I got you at 85. And I said, "Oh, good." I mean, no, you're probably right. I'm telling you, the last I looked was 95. And he said, "I got you at 85. And I said, "Okay, that's good." That's the best ticket I ever paid, because I knew it was a whole lot less than I'd actually been driving. And so he gave me a ticket, and I finally got on into Albuquerque about an hour and a half after dinner was long since cold. Got the drawings done the next few days, got him a permit, went on. Tiny little lesson about maps. I combine it with this. Years ago here in Tomball, somebody moved way out in the country and they invited us out to their home, just kind of a little housewarming get together and what have you. They came by the office. Let me draw you a little map. I said, okay, and they drew a map. I was fairly familiar with the whole area way back yonder before we even had a fast food joint in Tomball, which I realize some of you can't believe. Honestly, when we came to Tomball, there wasn't a McDonald's or anything in town. There was one grocery store, and that was Klein's grocery store. When we wanted to go eat on Sundays, we went down to 1960 in Stubner and ate at JoJo's. Remember JoJo's? That's the closest restaurant to us was JoJo's. And so they drew me a map. I said, okay, yeah, that's fine. We'll be out there. And I stuck the map on my wall right there where I couldn't miss it. Just stuck it on a piece of tape. Yep, I'll get it when because I had some work to do and I was going to finish it up and run to the office. But work took a little longer than I meant, and I was in a hurry to get home and eat, so I never even noticed it when I shut the door. Got home for lunch, had lunch, told my wife, oh, by the way, we're going to a family's house tonight, and oh, that's good, that's good, that's good. So that evening, we got in the car, and that's when it dawned on me, oh, I left the map on the wall. I didn't see any need to run back to the office and get it because I have such a keen mind and such a great memory back then. I visualized it. I literally visualized, okay, we're going to go there, and we turn at a little gas station there. We go down, the road forks, and then there's a bridge. And then we get over that bridge, let me think. We get over that bridge. We're so close at that point, how can I not find it? And so that's what we did. And so we drove, and sure enough, there's a little gas station, and we turned, and sure enough, there's a fork in the road, and we took it. And that was a very, never mind. God rest his soul, Yogi Berra. And so we took the fork, and then sure enough, there was a bridge. And then there was no turn, and there was another bridge, and I didn't remember two bridges. And so you turned around a driveway, drove back, got there to the gas station, you go up, take the fork, left or right. Can't remember now. Maybe it was right. Go right. There's a bridge way down there on that one. No cell phone. The new homeowners had not installed their home phone yet. They were so new in their home. Go back to the gas station. Call someone else in church who knows them. Maybe they know where they live. Call another member in church, and I said, hey, you have any idea? And they said, oh, yeah, let me think just a minute. Let me think. Where are you at now? I'm at the gas station on wherever. Okay, you go on down the road, there's a fork down there. Yeah. Man, I can't remember if you turned right or left. Have you seen a bridge? I saw 3 bridges so far. Oh, well, man, I can't help you. Who might? Well, so I called somebody else who might know. He said, hey, you know what? We're fixing to get out and about. I know it by sight, but I can't tell you the names of the streets. Why don't we just run by there and lead you down? Oh, well, that'd be great. So again, we're supposed to be there 30 minutes ago. Now we wait 15 more minutes for somebody to arrive. And then that person says, just follow me. And sure enough, he goes down there, turns left, goes over 2 bridges, not one. Another mile down there, turns right, goes up, turns left. There's a driveway. There's the cars of the other couple of people already there. And we're dragging in after the barbecue's eaten. And so I thanked him, and it was so nice, and so on and so forth. It's not like I make a habit of getting lost, but I will tell you that that little story about finding a friend's house for dinner is my basis today to try to offer you a little bit of hope for the lost. I'm just going to share a few simple things with you that I think might direct all of us a little bit. chaos and confusion reign in the religious world right now in America. I fully understand the prophetic verse that in the last days there'll be a famine, not of food, not of bread, but a famine of the hearing of the word. I understand that. I have friends who I think ought to understand a few basic fundamental things about Scripture because we were raised similarly and we're about the same age, and yet we are so far apart scripturally that it's troubling. Troubling because, one, I'm an introspective kind of person. I like to make sure I know why I believe what I believe and can answer for it. Be able to give a reason to anyone for the hope that lieth within you. That's what the Scripture says. And so I like to think I can give anybody a reason for what I believe, why I believe it based on Scripture. And then I think, well, so should they. And I'm telling you, when some of the political hot-button issues put us so far apart that there's not even a bridge big enough to connect us theologically. When we have a completely different concept of God, Christ, the church, salvation, theology, baptism, it's like troubling to a degree I can't even fathom. And I say all this to you hoping that I'm not like the only one out here struggling on this narrow limb. I'm really conscientiously serious about wanting to be saved. I'm not in the church because it's a pretty cool club and it has a gym, because it doesn't. I don't belong because I like all of you, and I'd hate to just sit home on Sundays and watch TV. I'd rather come up here. I'm actually engaged and involved in what I think is the pursuit of personal salvation. I want to be saved. If I die next week, or if the Lord comes and raptures His church, I want to go. I want to be ready. And I don't think that He's going to say, oh, you belong to the church? Oh, good, check. I don't think belonging to the church is the key. I think it's going to be that I really know Christ, that I really have a connection spiritually to Christ, that I invited Him in when He knocked at that door, Revelation 3:20, and He came into me. His Spirit dwells within. That's my hope. And man, I talk to a few people occasionally, and during the week I'll have a reason to get in conversation with somebody, and it's almost like everybody's first response to you, if you're going to ask about faith, their first response is, I go to church. Okay. Well, I go to X brand church. Oh, okay, that's good. Wasn't trying to get you to go to church. I was asking if you had, I was in a restaurant here a while back, and I overheard a couple of people behind me eating breakfast, and I overheard a couple of people behind me just talking about life problems, and they were talking about, one of them was clearly terribly depressed, and she was talking about how bummer life was, and how if it wasn't for this friend and that friend, she didn't know what she'd do, and so I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. They just weren't being quiet. They were making noise about it. And so I just thought, yeah, sometimes I don't mind my own business. And so I just thought when I got up and walked out, I would just say, just don't ever forget that Jesus loves you and Jesus cares. And they'd know I'd been listening to them, but I thought, well, it's worth a shot anyway. So I did. I just tapped on the table and I looked at the depressed one and I said, just so you know, Jesus knows. He understands. He cares. And I don't know what I expected her to say. I guess I thought she might just say, oh, thank you very much, and, let me take a hike. And instead, I think she was slightly offended at it. She kind of looked up and said, thank you, we go to church. Like I was fixing to impose on them and invite them to my church. And so, common sense would have just gone on and left. But, but I just smiled back and I said, wasn't fixing to invite you to church. Just wanted you to know Jesus knows. And then I walked off. I felt so much better when I got that cheap shot in trying to do Jesus work for Him. And then I got to throw that little cheap shot in. Then I got in my truck and I just thought, what's wrong with all of us in America? Why are we so defensive? I go to church. Dear Lord, do they ever knock on your door? Are you rude to them when they do? 2 by 2? Have you ever invited them in? You know, they need Jesus. They're souls he made. They're honest-hearted, sincere people trying to do what they think is right. I invited 2 into my house one time. I always have a condition. I always have a string attached. You can come in and talk to me about your faith, but only on one condition. What's that? Whatever amount of time you spend talking to me, I get to talk to you. You want to come spend 30 minutes talking to me? I get 30 minutes talking back. They bought it. Remember, we set them up for dinner the next night. And I asked them, I said, my wife will make dinner. You drink tea? No, we'll have water. And I knew they didn't. I was being smart, doing Jesus' work with an attitude. And I said, do you drink tea? No, but we'll have water. And so my wife made a nice meal. The next evening they showed up and they came in. We had a nice visit, a nice get together. And then we went to the couch and they sat down with their books and their flip chart. And they spent 30 minutes telling me basically that, you know, everything I knew was wrong and everything I'd been taught was wrong. And I was going to hell with all the stuff I had. And, you know, I mean, they were pretty plain with their theology. And when they got through, I know what they were expecting. They were expecting me to tell them about my church. But I didn't. I said, okay, I got 30 minutes. Y'all took exactly 30 minutes. I got 30 minutes. And I got 30 minutes to tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you why I believe in Jesus Christ. Let me tell you what he's done in my life and what he's done for me. And I spent 30 minutes talking to these ladies about Jesus. And about 20 minutes into it, one of them started crying. And as soon as she started crying, the other one started trying to gather their books up. And she started actually trying to interrupt and quit. And I said, hey, wait. I still got 5 minutes. You promised me equal amount of time. And I turned to her and I said, why are you crying? What is it when I talk to you about an experience with Jesus Christ, what is it that tugs at you emotionally and spiritually? What causes this? Point I'm trying to make to you two ladies is you're noble people doing a great job, but you're doing it for a church. You're doing it for, might as well be a denomination. We all oppose each other and fight each other ad nauseum. You're doing it because of a structured system that you're part of, and that's good. I compliment you. But when I just spend my time talking about Jesus, why I believe in him, why I believe he lives in me, what I think he has done transformationally in my life, how I think he has changed me. He has, not my church. I haven't even told you what kind of church I go to, and yet you weep because we're talking about a connection with Christ. Man, when my clock hit that time, the other one had her up. They were out. They were gone. A day or so later, a badge-wearing head honcho, big title name person came calling. I understand some of our missionaries were not able to answer some of your questions the other day, and I have come to clear up any confusion. I said, no ma'am, there is no confusion. They answered all of my questions the best they could. They did what they were supposed to. There was no reason for you to come unless, in fact, I thought the ladies were going to come back. Why are the ladies not coming back? Is this your way of saying we're done with our... The ladies weren't coming back. They were shipping one weeper off for reprogramming and retraining. She should never have broken down in front of someone she was trying to teach and lead. They have a philosophy in their religion, you are never the learner, you're always the teacher. You do not let anyone teach you, you teach them. They lost their way somewhere. They lost their direction, the good people, but they lost their way. Sad thing is, I'm not sure anybody is interested in showing them the way. We just give up on people because we brand them and categorize them. Oh, they're in that group, they're in that group, might as well give up. They're in that group. Oh, yeah, well, they're so-and-so. And as long as we can just categorize people and say they're that, and they're that, and they're that, and they're that, then we don't have anything to offer them because, we'll get an argument. You know, if I try to talk to a Baptist and I'm Pentecostal, well, that we know where that's going. If I'm Methodist and I try to talk to a Pentecostal, you know. So we just brand everybody by their labels, and there's nothing else for us to do or talk about or engage in. Wouldn't it be something if we actually knew where Jesus was and we knew how to find Christ and a connection to Him? And so these are the simple points I want to tell you. First of all, I want to tell you there is a map. There really is a map to follow. It's not that there's a creed, by the way. There's a thing out on the hallway that we want all of you to read. I meant to pass them out today and I forgot. So when you leave today, go down the hallway and you'll find one piece of paper that says Our Common Faith. And take it home and read it, because it's got some common faith statements in there that are precursory to a membership form we're going to pass out for everybody here in another week or so. And so I meant to pass them out, I didn't. But let me just tell you, that little piece of paper out there in the hallway and that creed, that statement of beliefs, it is written generically, but it's also written for political expediency only. It is not your map to finding Christ. It is not our theology that's bound and determined to save everybody. It is only hanging out there in that hallway because of political necessity these days. And I'm pretty sure you already know where that's going. And so politically, we need you to read that statement out there for things that we're going to introduce to the church down the road in a few weeks, just for political reasons. That's not a map to Christ by any stretch of the imagination. But we have one. We have a book that has told us from the very beginning to the very end. The entire story of man is contained from Genesis to Revelation. It is a roadmap not to church. It is a roadmap to Christ. You can find Christ in virtually every book of the Old Testament. You can find a statement or reference, a description of, a title or a phrase that in some way was designed to point men to a coming Messiah, and then you can find that Messiah born in Matthew, fulfilling the prophecies of the old. Not written by God, but inspired by God, written by humans in language that humans could grasp and understand. Do you think any one of us with our brains could actually comprehend the act of creation if he had tried to explain to us creation? Of course not. It's simplified in the book of Genesis for us. It's not about 6 24-hour period days, because we don't even get the language of Genesis. Sun and the moon weren't hung into place until the fourth day. So what does that make the first 3 days? 24 hours before 24 hours existed? Of course not. That wasn't the point. The point was he wrote an irrefutable description of his creation. Had men written it according to the science of the knowledge of what they knew, we would have rejected the Bible long ago and thrown it out. But it was written so cleverly and so divinely inspired that all these 3,500 years, we still pick up the book of Genesis and read the account of God's creation and realize that in that one simple book, he left room for God to have been God long before Adam and Eve were ever his beginning point with this race of man. You think God just woke up one day and decided 6,000 years ago start creating stuff and doing stuff, and you're the recipient of it? Then your God is a temporary God, not eternal. But even in that accounting, he says, fill the earth again. To Adam, the same way he said to Noah, replenish the earth. Fill it, like something might have been here, but I don't know. But he certainly left the possibility dangling there, and a man couldn't have known to write that. Why did God do that? Because God wanted to give us an irrefutable book, a book that wouldn't be stamped with time on it, a book that we wouldn't have to apologize for and say, well, they were just writing according to the science of the day. They didn't write according to the science of the day. They wrote mystically and majestically. They wrote in such a way that 3,500 years we can still read it and not throw it out and discard it as irrelevant. Fascination with this book. God didn't write it, but he inspired it because men could never have been that clever. Why would God go to the trouble to inspire men to write a timeless piece of truth like he did? Because that is your map. That's your key to him. You close this book with Revelation, the 3rd chapter, and that most poignant picture of Christ knocking on the door and saying to all of us, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man will hear me and open to me, I will come into him. That's what the whole book was about. Christ coming into you. Not into your church. It's not about your church. You can probably write this down and get it notarized, and it's probably going to hold up in eternity. A lot of people who go to church are actually not going to go to heaven because they have no clue who Jesus is, and he is not going to live in them if they have to conform to him and his image and his ideas. They're going to go to a church that tells them what they want to hear and what they want to do, and that's it, plain and simple. And it doesn't matter how many ways you can argue with them. Second thing on the screen says that map has to be followed exactly. The map, not a church, not a creed, not a formula, not our common faith hanging on the wall. That Bible needs to be read, understood, and complied with. And that's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing. One of my Facebook friends, I've known her for 40 years, preacher's daughter. Love her dearly, sort of. She's a pistol. Her father was a pistol. He was a character. The other day she posted a defense of Joel Osteen. She just said, why do people get so bent out of shape over Joel Osteen? She wrote some sweet, nice things about him. She spent about that much room on Facebook trying to say, for Pete's sake, folks, is he condemned just because he's rich? He doesn't even take any money from the church. He doesn't need any money from the church. You know he doesn't take a salary from Osteen. I mean, one book they gave him $12 million advance for. The man never has to work another day in his life. And even when Larry King pinned him down, she didn't say all this, I'm defending him now. Even when Larry King and a few other reporters tried to pin him down about some issues and he waffled around a little bit, what they didn't tell you was he sent out a mass email to all of his church members and anybody that wants to read it, apologizing after the fact. Said, I didn't realize how that came across. I didn't realize how it sounded. Sometimes when the camera's on, the mic's in front of you, the pressure's running. I just try not to be offensive to people, and sometimes in trying not to be offensive, I may come across as if I'm a little weak on some areas and offend some, and I don't want that to be the case. And in fact, in this particular issue, I think my church knows how I feel and stand, and my opinion is, and he gave his opinion clearly. You think they publicized that and drug that back on to show, oh, he apologized after being interviewed. And of course they didn't. And you think, okay, she just offered a nice apology and told people, leave him alone. Oh, you should see what some of your friends wrote in response to her. Christians, all of them Christians, the angry people, angry at her for defending such a slime. Tear him down, destroy him. You need to understand what the man preaches. We don't care about his money, but he preaches a lie. And then they list the lies. And my goodness, I read some of the people listing his lies, and I wanted to be like Joe Wilson. You lie! Because they're preaching lies, countering his lies. scary. Makes me wonder if anybody's following the map exactly. We're following our church doctrine and dogma. And even if somebody sits down and says, look, can you show me that verse in the Bible? Why? Doesn't really matter. In 1948, the founding fathers, and they decided, and we have stood on this, and it's ours. But that's not the map. You see, I would ask all of you today, do you know what the Bible teaches? Do you have the connection with Christ that the Bible teaches you to have? Or did you just satisfy that by walking an aisle, signing a church card, kneeling at an altar, doing whatever your church denomination requires you to do? Go in a private room with a church counselor and minister, pray a sinner's prayer, walk through the Romans road. What, all of that's sweet and wonderful, but do you come away from it today saying, I have Jesus in my heart because I asked him to come in when he knocked, and he transformed me by the renewing of my mind. Number 3, have to be careful following landmarks. Landmarks, signs. One of my friends' critics the other day, who she defended in one of the posters was saying something to this effect, and I'm going to embellish it a little bit for the point, but one of the posters said something to this effect. If you would get back into a real church, there you go. There's the language. If you would ever get back in a real church and you might actually see the miracles of God. Because everybody knows the miracles of God only take place in a real church. They don't take place where your need is. They don't take place in your heart and your life regularly. They couldn't occur unless you were in a real church. The problem is I can go to a false church and probably see some kind of sign. My friend years ago said, now when you see the bridge, and I just, all I had in my brain was, I'm going to look for that bridge. And he failed to mention there was another bridge. And if I took the wrong turn, there was a bridge on that one too. So I was just lost following landmarks, and as simple and shallow as that comparison is, I'm telling you, I've got friends today that they will qualify a church, if on nothing else, they're just qualified on the act of baptism. Baptism. Oh, that's all I need to know right there. You can't be a real church. Do y'all know, and I don't know if there's any, I'm assuming there's no haters in here of anybody. I assume there's no Joel Osteen haters in here. But just for argument's sake, did you know that it's easy to criticize and condemn someone who deliberately leaves all the landmarks out of his teaching and preaching? So all the code language everybody in denomination is looking for does not appear in Joel Osteen's sermons. You do understand that what people see on TV is a carefully edited 20-minute sermon. You do know that. You don't get to see the ensemble sing and worship. You don't get to see the prayer time for people. You get to see what they have deliberately decided to put before the world, for the world to see. I don't know Joel personally. I have no reason to defend him. I have no reason to tear him down. I know his brother personally, and he's a prince of a man. He's a prince of a man. He's a doctor. He's a surgeon who gives up his time, donates his services. Several months out of the year, he will fly to impoverished nations, and he will simply set up surgical clinics with some other doctors, and they will perform much needed surgeries for people that will never ever see a true hospital or a true surgeon, will never have money to get access to the finest medicine. And he does all that free of charge. Totally free. Not underwritten by Lakewood, or just out of his pocket and out of his money. He gives himself. That's a pretty good sign for me when I see somebody even doing that kind of charity. But it's a whole lot different when somebody says, well, our church is sending us on a missions trip. Really? Won't you fund it yourself? Don't you dig down and give up some of your savings money and fund yourself on it. I've got a couple of friends who send themselves to Haiti 2 or 3 times a year. They don't wait for their church to send them. They go. You want to be a missionary? Don't wait till somebody gives you a hotel room and $1. Go do it. And when I see somebody who does, I'm like, man, that's good right there. That's soul searching deep. But what church are they? What church are they out of? Oh, well, they're disqualified. They're done, because every church has landmarks. What you believe about this and what you believe about that and what you believe about that, and it's written in stone and it's in your manual, and there you are. And we follow those landmarks. I can go to any town as long as I know what landmarks to look for, and I say, where do y'all go to church? What do y'all do about this, that, and the other? And now I've got my landmarks in place. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to follow a denominational movement based on 1 or 2 doctrines, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as beyond those landmarks, you're making sure that you have that connection with Christ. Because if you don't have the connection with Christ, it doesn't matter how many landmarks you followed to get in the herd and be where you are with the group. It's got to be about Christ, or it's nothing. And finally, and I conclude with, when the guy finally just showed up at the gas station and just said, "Follow me," and took off, it was so comforting for us to just pull out and follow somebody who knew the way. Didn't have to read the road signs in case I'm coming back later. Doesn't matter. I'm going to follow him. I get there. Thank you very much. He's off and on his way. And he didn't even get to stay for food. He wasn't invited. But he knew where he was going. Years ago, many years ago, Vietnam, one of my buddies had fallen into a mess in his life. He'd gotten on drugs in Vietnam. And then he availed himself of a base prostitute, and he got a disease from her. And he was a wretch. He was literally, mentally, and spiritually, he was a wretch. And he came running through my hooch one day, and he stopped at my cot, and he said, "Oh, thank God you're here." And I said, "Why?" And he was just a nervous wreck. He was just shaking his hands. He couldn't be still. And he said, "Thank God you're here." And I said, "Why? What's wrong?" I thought I was needed at a duty post somewhere. And he flopped down on the end of my cot and put his hands over in his head, and he just started shaking and groaning. And he said, "Carpenter, I screwed up, man. I really screwed up. I messed my life up so bad. I've screwed up." And I said, "Well, why don't you just tell me what you've done?" He said, "I'm on my way to every base camp had a shrink, a psychiatrist." He said, "I'm on my way to the shrink, and I just thought I'd come see you first." I don't know why. I was 19 years old like he was. I had a little prayer service on Thursday nights. But on his way to the shrink, he first decided to run by my hooch and see if I was by my cot. I know today why he did, and you do too. Because our age didn't matter. Somehow, instinctively, he just knew that if he had a chance of somebody showing him a path to follow, it would probably be me out of all our friends. I'm not patting myself on the back. I just know that's why he came. He said, "I was hoping you'd be here. I'm on my way to the shrink." And I said, "Why? What's wrong?" And then he opened up and told me what I just told you. I suspected it, but I didn't know. And then he told me what he had done and how messed up his life was. And he just poured his soul out. And when he got all through, he's shaking his head down. He's crying. He said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. My life is ruined." And I said, "What are you going to the shrink for?" He said, "I don't know, man. Maybe they'll give me some drugs or something. Maybe they'll fix me. I don't know." So when he stumbled around for an answer, I said, then why are you here? Why did you come to me?" And again, he's crying. He said, "I don't know, Carpenter, you're a Christian. You seem to be able to resist all this stuff. You don't do any of this stuff." I didn't do drugs. I didn't use the base services. I didn't crow about it. I didn't know anybody knew. I just was what I was. And my friend was just shaking and crying, and the drug shake, just nervousness. And finally, I was crying with him, and I just said, Kevin, man, I'm not trying to pin you down with questions. I just want you to know why you're here. You didn't come by my cot because I have a magic wand to wave over you, and I certainly have no drugs to offer you. You came to my cot because you suspect that I'm living for Jesus, and Jesus is living in me, and I've got something bigger than drugs and bigger than your disease and bigger. You suspect that, and I want you to know that's why you're here. Because if you understand that's why you're here, then I'm going to lead him to you and you to him, and we're going to hook up right here on my cot, you and Jesus. And then we all wept and we prayed for a little while, and I put my arms around his shoulders and I invited Jesus. See, it's cool in Vietnam. If I'd been here in the country, I would have said, why don't you come to my church Sunday? You know what you really need? You need to come to my church and maybe talk to my minister. But in Vietnam, didn't have a church to invite him to. Didn't have a choir, didn't have a minister, didn't have a gym, didn't have a health club. It's just Jesus he needed. And unfortunately, Jesus is all I had to offer him. And so I offered Jesus to a boy from Boston, Massachusetts, who talked funny. I didn't get along with because he parked the car in the yard and walked the dog, and I just like, what? So I said, I don't know if he can understand me or not. He doesn't speak English, but here's how simple it is, Kevin. The only reason you felt led to come to me is because I know the way. I know the one who paves the way. I know the one who will make you an overcomer, make you strong, who will get you past this. All I got to try to do is figure out how to get you to open your heart to him and let him come in. And he's crying, I want to. It was so simple, without having to skirt through church stuff and church language. It was so simple for us to just pray and for him to just open up and invite Christ into his heart. You know what changed him? Isn't that amazing? We forget that Jesus actually has power, that he really does transform people. It changed that boy. Started right there on my cot. It changed him. He didn't feel like he needed to go to the shrink, and then I was scared like maybe I'll get in trouble if he kills himself. And they'll say, oh, he was going to shrink, and Carpenter talked him out of it, because guys were eavesdropping on us. I'm like, well, maybe you should go. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Thank you, Jesus. And he was turned around that day. Transformed his character, his soul. Something changed in him. Stand, please. Wouldn't it be great if some of your friends that are lost and struggling to find the way, and you wish they'd read the Bible, but they're not ever going to read it quite right? Wouldn't it be great if they just had somebody who knew where the bridges were, where the fork in the road was? Wouldn't it be great if you could just talk to somebody about what you know? Father, thank you today for your blessing and your presence. Lord, we're living in a world of lost people. Sometimes we honestly don't know what we're supposed to tell them. We don't know. We wish our church had handouts we could just give to everybody, and we wish we had a secret formula we could throw on them. But Lord, would you just remind us that it's just enough for us to take what you have put in us and give a cup of cold water to somebody who's thirsty in the name of the Lord, and they will get that connection. That's all you asked. You didn't ask us to be billboard painters. You just said, give a cup of cold water in your name. Just pass on to somebody what you have put in us. Show them Jesus. Show them that you're the way, the truth, the life. And then they won't be lost. They'll be found. That's our prayer today, Father, that you find all of us, that you save us all and help us to continue to shine the light, save the others that we love and we care about. I will tell you this in closing, somebody's lost that you know, and all they really need is somebody who knows the way and can show them. Show somebody the way. God bless you. We'll see you next Sunday, 10:30.